Well, Colin Hanks, we're all in the middle of watching Fargo on FX right now, and your character, Gus Grimly, in an article I wrote yesterday to promote this chat, I called him a reluctant hero. How would you refer to him?
I think that's a fair description of him. I mean, he's definitely a man that's out of his element. You know, he's in over his head and out of his depth for sure. But he definitely feels a responsibility to sort of fix or right this wrong that he committed by letting Malvo go in that first episode. And the deeper he gets into this sort of web as the series progresses, he just keeps finding himself more and more, out of his element. And as last night's episode so eloquently pointed out, he's very ill-equipped. And but yeah, I mean, a hero, maybe. I mean, he's definitely reluctantly trying to do that right thing. And a lot of times I sort of feel like, the most realistic kind of like quote unquote heroes are people that aren't necessarily ones you would think would be doing these things or trying to fix these things. They aren't necessarily the ones that are the ones you'd expect to save the lady or do anything like that. So yeah, I don't know. I think to a degree that works, but I also sort of feel like perhaps I'm not the best person to describe him.
Well, you say ill-equipped, but really he and Molly, the other deputy, they were the only ones to figure this out, to figure out what is going on. Everybody else, all their superiors, co-workers, don't believe any of this that's going on.
Well, I think to a degree he definitely is just following Molly's lead. Molly is the true detective, to borrow a phrase from another television show, but she's much more nuanced and much more has more experience in terms of actually doing detective work. Whereas Gus really was never given the opportunity or the chance to really do that. He just sort of does the odd jobs there in Duluth that none of the other police officers really want to do. That said, he is able to sort of put two and two together, and both Gus and Molly pool their resources and are able to sort of crack this thing. But they're both shall we say, minimized in their workplace. Gus is obviously just sort of laughed off and no one really takes seriously at all. And Molly is sort of seemingly a nuance, basically annoying to any of the other police officers there, especially Bill, Bob Odenkirk's character. So I think the two of them are both underdogs in that way, and so they are the only ones, when no one else is going to listen to them, they just try their best to solve this thing.
Well, let's go back to that premiere episode, because I can understand how Gus feels like he made a mistake letting Malvo go, but boy, when the episode ended, I was thinking out, maybe even out loud, I would have done the same thing. I mean, you could sense that if he didn't let him go, things were not going to end well.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were so many things going on in that one scene, and the one of the things that I found really unique about just that first episode, which is really all I had to go on. I mean, really, I just was able to choose the series based on that one script, and the entire script was so well written, but here is ostensibly one of the four sort of main characters within the series. And you introduce him towards the end of the pilot episode. I mean, a majority of the time, if you're playing by normal TV rules, you got to introduce all 8 main characters within the first 10 minutes. And so here's this scene towards the end. You're not quite sure who this guy is when you see him talking on the walkie to his daughter. He pulls over a man whom the audience already knows is a very, very evil guy. And so you're instantly thrown into Gus's shoes, so to speak, and you have to ask yourself, well, what would I do if I'm threatened by this guy you know, how would you handle that? What would you do? And you know, Gus's inaction in that scene, which I think is actually more important than his actions, because he actually doesn't do anything. He passively lets him go. He doesn't want to, but that's what ends up happening. That scene, that's a killer scene. As an actor, you want those kinds of scenes. And a lot of times when I'm auditioning for jobs, I'll sort of decide if I want to go out for a job based on the strength of their scenes. And that scene was so good, I said, I've got to at least just go out for this because it would be a fun afternoon. And then little did I know that, you know, I'd get the part, and then the rest of the series would fold out the way that it did.
You know, not just that scene, but so many over the course of the episodes that we've watched. And of course, there's a few more to go, but the silences between the characters I find sometimes to be as interesting as what they might say.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the beats, you know, it's those moments. I mean, any show that I watch that has those moments, I'm instantly thinking, well, what are they going to say? Like, what would I say? You know, it sort of is a tool to be able to bring that audience in, and you know, we were very lucky that very early on, FX really accepted Noah's vision of the show and what he wanted, and at no point were we really, in terms of, you know, I mean, sure, you shoot some scenes quickly because you're running out of daylight or something like that, but very rarely were those actory moments rushed. A lot of times that's the stuff that gets cut out. A lot of times that's the stuff that, you know, they feel that, you know, you just don't have time for, and so you just shoot it from as many angles as you can, and then when they edit it all together, it's just really quick, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and all of those moments are really sort of lost. But those moments, I think, are really important for our show because, again, it's this mentality of, you know, that sort of the Minnesota nice that somebody coined that we've been saying a lot, but then also that's how the Coen brothers films are. You know, there's a pace to them. It's deliberate, you know, and it adds, I think, another layer to each of the characters and the way that they interact. But it also, you know, adds some drama sometimes and comedy as well. You know, it's another tool that we have. You know.
Well, the conversations on the show aren't like. Some of them are, but some of them aren't like anything else on TV or in film. And I particularly want to ask you about, and I can't remember the actor's name, but the neighbor from across the way, the scene at your table, I guess kitchen table, which is such an interesting scene to watch.
Well, it was a definitely interesting scene to shoot. You know, I thought that even while we were filming it, I thought that it was going to be, it was pretty unique and interesting just having the conversation just be between the two. You know, the two characters, but it was, you know, it was written in the script that the audience would see the story that the neighbor was telling, and you know, look, I again, that's another really great scene where you know what Gus is wrestling with, and you see him ask the advice of someone, a man he does not really know. And they're able to shed a little bit of light on something. And at the end, you know, I was really sort of impressed that what Gus takes away from it, and it's something that he wrestles with, you know, for a long time, is that, you know, even when the, you know, even if you can't solve that problem, you have to at least try. And that really is pretty telling of the kind of character Gus has, you know, that he would, you know, you have to try. I thought that was just a beautiful sort of summation of Gus.
That opening scene that you have with Billy Bob Thornton, and then you have him, so far from what we've seen a couple of more times, arresting him and then at the jail, because you let him go, your character let him go, does he feel like he has a power over you?
Does Malvo feel he has a power over Gus? Absolutely. I think Malvo feels he has power over everybody. You know, I think, you know, when Malvo looks at pretty much everyone else in the world. He feels that he can manipulate them. He feels sorry for them. He feels that, well, I don't even know if he feels sorry for him. He probably doesn't even feel pity for him. I think, you know, Malvo's worldview is pretty dark and pretty different, and he doesn't really suffer fools at all. And I think when he sees Gus, you know, I sort of feel like he kind of chooses who he wants to really pick on and who he doesn't. And for whatever reason, he sees Gus, and Malvo just makes this decision of, well, I'm not going to hurt this guy. I'm going to threaten him. I'm going to manipulate him. I'm going to toy with him. But this, you know, Gus is clearly not a threat at all, and so there's no need to take him out. And so, you know, I don't know if it's sympathy or whatever, but I just sort of feel like, you know, he decides to use Gus as a pawn in his game, you know, so to speak.
Well, even in that opening scene, I mean, it was only the two of you out on the road. He could have easily killed Gus. That would have been good for you in terms of an actor, but he could have easily killed him. But I think, like you say, I think he had ulterior motives, as well as he's arriving in a town where he's going to be staying for a while. So why set off alarm bells?
Yeah, you don't want to kill a cop when you finally get to Duluth, and that's where you're supposed to be. Do you know what I mean? I think Malvo sort of sees everything as a really elaborate chess game, and he knows when he has to make a move and strike, but he also knows when he has to make a move to set up something else. And I think when he pulls, when Gus pulls Malvo over, he knows, look, you know, obviously there's no need in killing this guy, but he's not about to get a ticket. He's not about to sort of announce that he's there, considering he's in a stolen car and has just committed a homicide back in Bemidji. So or Bemidji, excuse me to anyone from Bemidji. I sometimes pronounce it wrong. But yeah, I think you know, Malvo is very you know, cunning in that way, and so. Yeah, he plays the board as he sees fit, and I think in Gus he doesn't really see anything threatening whatsoever.
And for you, acting opposite Billy Bob Thornton, what's that been like?
It was a treat. I mean, Billy Bob's a great guy. I had worked with him on another job the previous year, so I spent some time hanging out with him, talking with him. He's a really easy guy to get along with, and really, you know, when you're talking about people you want to work with, you just want to work with people that you can hang out with, because really part of our job is sitting around killing time. You know, we'll sit around and talk for hours, but we'll only work for, you know, little like a minute at a time, minute at a clip. But he's an extremely talented guy. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I didn't need to work with him to discover that. I knew that going in, and you know, he's just so perfect and so good in this role. I'm actually really happy that people get to be reminded what an amazing actor Billy Bob is.
And you have had a lot of scenes with Alison Talman, and I'm sure for someone like yourself who's been doing this a while, it's got to be a lot of fun to see. I mean, I had not known any of her, so to see an actress that most of the public doesn't know knock it out of the park, I mean, you've got to enjoy that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's actually really fun and invigorating. You know, I had met Alison up in Calgary where we shot, and I had hung out with her on numerous occasions. Had a bunch of dinners with her, and really just liked her as a person, but hadn't worked with her yet, and was sort of nervous because, you know, you don't know, you never know how someone like that is gonna react under the sort of the pressure, so to speak. But she was so flawless and so good and prepared and just really just sort of inspiring in that way, that I'm actually really fortunate that we got to work together as much as we did, because I ended up learning as much from her than I did from someone like Billy Bob or any of the other actors that I've worked with. You know, you sort of learn from everybody, and Alison was really refreshing in that way of, you know, her confidence, her ability, her skill, her demeanor. You know, it's very easy for actors to get bitter on, you know, on location when it's -30 degrees outside, but Alison was always a trooper, and quite frankly, is so perfect. There's no one else that could play Molly Solverson. I mean, within the first episode, I think that was pretty clear. So, you know, I'm really happy for her, and no doubt, you know, there's going to be a lot more of Alison Talman in all of our lives. We hope the world would be a better place.
Well, as an actor, looking at projects, looking at ideas, things to do, this is sort of a recent phenomenon, this limited series, anthology. True Detective does it, your show, American Horror Story does it from year to year, where you bring in a whole new plot, a whole new set of characters, possibly a lot of new cast members. Certainly in the case of True Detective, that's going to be the case. I guess Fargo as well. Doesn't that give you all a whole lot more creative freedom? Because anything could happen to any character at any moment. You're not trying to drag those characters out over a bunch of years.
Well, yeah. Look, I sort of mentioned it earlier, but TV has always sort of functioned within the specific construct of here are the rules. You got to introduce these characters, you know, within these pages. You have to have this act break. You have to do, you know, there are all of these sort of tenets in place that have been in place for a long time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think nowadays, in terms of the way that people watch TV, how they watch it, when they watch it, and the kind of stories that you're now allowed to tell, you don't necessarily have to play by those rules all the time. You know, I'm not saying every show should be like that, but it's nice to have the option. And with this, you know, clearly, I think in a lot of ways it's very liberating because you know that there's an end game. It's not just going to be this thing that just keeps going and going and going and going and going, and you have no idea where it's going to end, or if it's going to end, or how it's going to end, if you're even going to get that ending. Do you know what I mean? Whereas this, you know, and I sort of look at it more as like a mini-series more than anything else. It's like, look, we're starting at A, we're ending at Z, and there's a lot of really different things that can happen between now and then. But it's all being told, you know, it's not like all of a sudden there's going to be some cousin that shows up that's then going to be in every episode afterwards. It is freeing. It is because you know that you can play and you can be a genuine, and you can observe these characters as opposed to sort of putting on a sort of a certain kind of performance. I think our show allows each actor to perform in a certain way that, as actors, we're all salivating, you know, too, and create these sort of well-rounded, three-dimensional characters in which, like you said, sometimes, you know, when the character doesn't talk, they're saying everything. Do you know what I mean? And so when you have that kind of freedom, you know, from the get-go, there's really, I mean, you can pretty much go anywhere. You know, within that season, and we do. I mean, we don't really pull punches. You know, we really go for it.
You know, as I watched last night, I guess that was number 6, in the blizzard, and of course the kind of the twist ending that we don't know how it's going to turn out. I thought to myself, I don't know where this thing's going. I don't know. I don't have a clue what's going to happen to all these people.
That, you know, look, that's a delicate line. You know, sometimes that's really great, and that could be really exciting, and sometimes, you know, you could, you know, that could be the thing that, you know, makes you lose a lot of people's interests. But, you know, hopefully, I think, you know, at this stage now, we're like you said, 6 episodes in. You hope that, you know, the people that you know that are following the show, you hope that you got a good grip on them. You know, you hope that they really like the characters. You hope that they're rooting for some characters, whether it's for the characters to succeed or the characters to fail, or a little bit of both. But more than anything, you just hope that the audience really wants to see how this is going to resolve. And again, you know, because we're not necessarily playing by normal, you know, TV conventions, some of the stuff that we do is really kind of unique and a lot of fun. But for me personally, if I'm invested in those characters, I don't want to know what's going to happen. I want to be surprised. That's, you know, that's the really amazing thing about television now, is that, you know, you can invest this time and energy and you know, hopefully still be surprised by something. But it's a delicate line, you know. It's a very delicate line because you don't want to abuse that by any means, and we try very hard to keep people guessing, but not push them too far.
It has to make sense, but it can also be surprising.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to have Noah Hawley on Monday, the creator of this TV project, Fargo. What could I ask him that he would know it's coming from you?
Oh, geez, so that he could know it's coming from me.
Or just something interesting that I might not think of to ask in the interview.
That's a good question. God, you know, it's so funny. I've heard so many people ask him questions over the course of the last few weeks. I haven't even thought about any questions that I may have for him. Gosh, I don't know. You know, I think more than anything else, I would probably want to know how he came up with the general idea for the show and the concept for the show. Do you know what I mean? I think one of the really unique things that he was placed in a very unique position. Remake probably one of the most, or not remake, but you know, rework one of the most iconic films of probably, you know, the last 25 years, but don't do it with any of the characters. And make it your own, but yet make it familiar. I mean, that's not an easy task, and yet somehow, not only has he done it, but I think in the process, it's sort of, I mean, at this stage, it's almost like a no-brainer. Like, yes, of course you don't want the same characters. Of course you don't want to just retell the story. You want something all new, but you want it to be familiar. But, I mean, at the time, that still was pretty radical thinking when, you know, when the show was sort of conceived and produced. So basically, just where does he have time to do anything else?
Well, it's, I mean, that's so
I know the answer. I know the answer to that question.
It's tricky to, like you say, how do you even go into that meeting where you say we want to do a TV show that's in the same style, the same sort of feeling to it, but nothing, you know, nothing else like the actual movie.
Well, I think he was also, I think, you know, to give credit to FX and to MGM as well, I think that was from the get-go what they wanted. And so really it was more just a question of trying to find somebody that was open to that and not necessarily intimidated. And Noah is an incredibly smart individual. He's, you know, an unbelievably talented writer, no doubt, but he's a very smart guy, and I think once he was, you know, once he heard, like, look, yeah, we want to redo this, but we don't want any of the same characters from the movie, I think that's instantly when his brain just spun off into some other place, and he started thinking of all the different things that he could do. So, yeah, he's a smart cookie, that Noah.
One more question, one more set of maybe a couple of questions on the Emmy Awards coming up this summer. Fargo is going to be in the miniseries categories. I'm interested in your, I don't know if you follow it all that closely, but that's where American Horror Story has been submitting. But True Detective, similar situation, is going into drama categories. What is your take on kind of the way that each of the different kinds of shows might be classifying themselves?
Well, you know, I think, I mean, for us, you know, I mean, I don't know, to be honest, you know, I don't know if there's going to be a second season of Fargo. I mean, I really genuinely don't know, and I don't think that they've really made that decision yet of what they're going to do. You know, we very much were just sort of focused on making sure that these 10 episodes were as good as they possibly could, and if we never did anything afterwards, that we could all sort of walk away and feel good and strong about it. You know, in terms of you know, where things get nominated and where they get slotted, you know, I really try not to really spend too much energy thinking about that. That's somebody else's job that's way above my pay grade. So, you know, I just, look, I'm really proud of this show, and obviously, you know, I hope it gets nominated for a bunch of stuff, and I hope it wins a bunch of stuff, but, you know, I don't really have any feeling one way or the other where it gets placed or who it gets placed against or anything. You look, I'm in love with a lot of shows. You know, I love True Detective and you know, I love, just like I love Breaking Bad and you know, a bunch of the other shows that are out there. So, you know, hopefully it'll help get you know, help the show get a little recognition. But at this stage now, you know, I'm just so happy that people are enjoying the show, that's really the most important thing for me, at least.
Yeah, it's my favorite TV project of the whole last 12 months. I'm really thoroughly enjoying it, and I think it's going to do really well at the Emmys this summer. We're an awards website, so I always like to ask at least a couple of awards questions.
I understand. Hey, man, listen, I don't mean to poo-poo awards by any means.
No, you'd be thrilled to be in that audience as a nominee that night.
I have no doubt about that. I'm not saying I wouldn't.
Well, good luck with that. I think you've got a really good shot in that supporting actor category. By the way, you may be up against Martin Freeman because he's submitted for Fargo. He's a lead, but for Sherlock, he's up for supporting. So that would be interesting if the two of you face off there.
I hope he wins them all, just based on his energy levels alone. The man could use it.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great summer.
Same to you. Take care.